Hello, all my students. It's Mr. Chang, reaching out to you guys once again, and I've got for you the basically the second last lesson in this trigonometry stuff. Cosine law actually, um, arguably, is the last lesson. We just have application questions next, where I just teach about some word problems, and we just kind of have a lesson that just looks up a few examples of word problems. But at this current point, really, the last thing you really need to learn is the cosine law. Here we go. Our goal today is to use the cosine law to solve for sides and angles in non-right triangles that cannot be solved with the sine law. Okay? If you can't use the sine law, then we're going to use the cosine law. Okay? And you always just go, if it's a right triangle, if it is, then great, we're going to use trig ratios. If it's not, then it's going to be sine law. And if you can't do the sine law because you don't have a matching angle and side, then you're going to break out the cosine law. Okay, so here are the steps. It says the steps for solving the sides and angles of the cosine law. You want to ensure the triangle has no matching side and a given angle. Okay, so as long as it has no matching side and a given angle, then you're basically looking at something like this, SAS, where you have a side, an angle, a side, or you might have three sides given, and then you have to find an angle. And we'll look at both cases. You got to label the vertices uppercase and lowercase, substitute the values into the cosine law, and isolate whatever the side or the angle is that you're trying to find. Okay, so here's the cosine law. Written out for finding a side, that a squared right there. Okay, and if you look at it, a squared is equal to b squared plus c squared, subtract 2bc cos a, and remember that this 2bc cos a is entirely to itself, and that's very important for us to understand that it's attached to each other because there's a multiplying that's happening in between there. Okay, a lot of times people just subtract the 2bc first, and that would be wrong because it's actually needs to get multiplied to cos a. All right, and another thing I want to say is if you look at here for an example, for an angle, we've got three sides of a triangle, and then at that point you can find angle A. Okay, you just have to do cos inverse to both sides and you'll have angle A. Okay, here you got to do square root right here, right? Make sure you square root that and you're good too. All right, let's talk about the conditions. So if you're given a side, an angle, and a side, that's looking like here's your side, here's your angle, and here's your side. They're all in that order. The angle is in between these two sides. You'll see I don't have a matching angle and side, right? This one doesn't have a match. Nope. This one doesn't have a match. Nope. And this one does not have a match. So because of this, you're going to use cosine law. Okay, and in this case, you can find cosine law for the missing side here, and you can find that out. In the other case over here, you can also have a triangle that is defined by all three sides given, side, 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 all right? And if you have all three sides given, you can actually figure out an angle. Okay, you can actually figure out which angle you're talking about. Just label it out and you can calculate the angle. All right, so let's see this stuff in action. It says, problem number 1, use the cosine law to calculate the length of side B. All right, so the first thing we want to do is make sure it's not a right angle triangle, and you don't see any indicators like this saying that it is a right angle triangle, so we need to assume that it isn't. Second step is let's just conclude. Let's see, is it a sine law situation? Do we have a matching angle and a side, right? And if you look over here, I don't have a matching angle or side anywhere. In fact, this question was supposed to indicate that it says 16 centimeters here for a side, 14 centimeters here, and I want you to write this in. This is 100 degrees. All right, so we have a side angle side situation. All right, so we have a side here, an angle here, and another side. So the next step is we got to label it out. If this is angle A, then directly across is side A, lowercase. If this is angle B, directly across is side B right there. And we are going to use proper color. Okay. And then if this is angle C, of course, this is side C. Let's write that better. Once you got it labeled, we are going to write out the cosine law for A right here. Okay. And you just write the side that you're trying to find. In this case, it's A. We're going to A squared is equal to b squared plus c squared, subtract 2bc, all multiplied to cos of A. If you chose the right formula, on your substitution phase, which is immediately after writing out the formula, you're going to be able to have everything. And watch what happens on the right side. Pause for a sec. Unpause. And did you get this? Right? There's a substitution. You'll see the entire right side is all substituted in. Next thing we got to do is just figure out what these values are. Okay, so we are just going to do the calculations and the computations to work it all out and see what we get. Okay, so I'm going to just skip ahead again. And blam, did you get this? You see, after the substitution, 16 squared is 256, 14 squared is 196, and you want to subtract this 2 times 16 times 14 cos 100. 2 times 16 times 14 is 448. It still needs to be multiplied by the cos 100, and when I do that, I have 452 subtract 448 cos 100, which actually works out to be negative 77.8. So when you subtract a negative, you're going to end up with a positive, right, adding, and that turns out to be 529.8. And you score both sides, you get 23.01. All right, so that's how you do it. There's your answer. Get a highlighter. Okay, A is 23.01. All right, now that's well and good, right? We had a side angle side situation, which I'm going to write here as SAS, triangle. Of course, that means use cosine law, and then we can find A right there. What if we have a side-side-side situation? So let's move on. Here it says, use the cosine law to calculate the measure of the angle E. Angle E. So you're going to see we're trying to get this right here, angle E. And I've given you all three of these sides. So what that creates is a side-side-side situation. Without any angles given, you've got all three sides. So what you got to do is you got to start with the proper formula. So if you look at the cosine law for an angle, you're going to write cos of E is equal to, all right, and let's just be very clear. Let's label out this triangle. This is E right here. This is side F, and this is side D. All right, so what we're going to write is the other angles we're not talking about, which is the D squared, and we also have the F squared, right? And we also have to subtract the E squared, all divided by, let's just double check with our formula, 2 df. There we go. All right, I'm just plugging in the appropriate letters to match up with what we're working with. So this turns out to look like this. Cos E is equal to your substitution. D is 14.5. Don't forget to write squared, plus F, which is 10.5. Subtract E, which is 12.2. All squared, all divided by 2D times D, right? 2 times D times F, which is 10.5. And I'm going to pause it. Let's let you guys work it out and see if you get the same thing. All right. After computing, you should follow the same steps as me. Do the inverse cos on both sides so that you can figure out what the inverse cos is, or the angle E, right? Angle E turns out to be 55.6848, which I rounded to 56 degrees, because when it comes to angles, we want to write them as the nearest degree possible. Okay, so in a triple side situation, you're using really the same formula, but this was just more isolated for the angle, which is cos E is equal to D squared plus F squared subtract E squared divided by 2DF. Substitute it and work it out. There's your angle. All right, let's keep it going. Okay, so if you guys have been noticing, I've been really trying to work on my drawings, so please be encouraging with these drawings. And you know, like, drawing girls was something I've never done as a kid, you know, and I'm just trying to go back to my kid drawing skills. I normally draw superheroes or guys doing action moves and stuff like that. Drawing girls was tough because I didn't know it's actually so challenging to get hair looking proper on girls. So hopefully you guys can appreciate the challenge there. Those of you guys who've tried drawing girls, well, you might be able to relate. So here we go. Rhea, Brianna, and Crisabella. three girls from our class, have formed a triangle and are throwing a frisbee to each other in gym class. Brianna notices that Rhea and Crisabella are separated at an angle of 75 degrees. Let me mark that. Angle of 75 degrees. Rhea is 17 feet away and Crisabella is 24 feet away. How far is Rhea from Crisabella? All right, so let's label this all out. I can tell you that the 75 degrees that we're talking about is the distance that Brianna is looking at Rhea and Crisabella. So let's take a moment and label it all out. I'm going to call this Rhea right here. And this will be C for Crisabella. And the girl on the bottom here is Brianna holding the frisbee. And she's looking at the two of these girls at an angle of 75 degrees. So let's put that in, 75 degrees right here. And we also know that Rhea is 17 feet away from Brianna. So we can write 17, little apostrophe for the feet symbol. And 24 feet is Crisabella right there. And so the question is asking you, how far away is Rhea from Crisabella? So we can use anything we want, but I guess since I used B, R, and C, I'll use a little lowercase b there. This will be lowercase c, and this will be lowercase r. Okay, and now we have everything labeled out. So if you could spot it, this is a cosine law situation because here we have a side given, here we have an angle, and here we have a side. The angle is in between the sides, which means we don't have a matching ratio. There is no matching side or angle to any of these values given, which means we can't do the sine law. We have to use a cosine law. Okay, so this is a cosine law situation, which we know better as side angle side. And if it's side angle side, then we are trying to find this value, that b. So we're going to write out the formula properly. It's going to look like this: b squared is equal to the other sides, which is r squared plus c squared subtract 2rc cos angle b. Okay, that's the formula, and we are going to start with our substitution, and you just write in your values, right? 24 cos is 75. All right, I'm just going to fast forward the computation here. Kablam! There's my computation after the substitution, right? Taking the proper steps, being very careful about what happens with this business over here, right? We've got to protect it. You want to subtract all that 816 times cos 75 first, which becomes 211.2. And then 865 subtract the 211.2 puts you at 653.8. Square root both sides, and you get b is 25.6. And you're going to say, therefore, we are talking about the distance between Rhea and Crisabella. Rhea and Crisabella are 25.6 feet away. Or Rhea is 25.6 feet away from Crisabella. So there you go. All right, and just to put it out there, and just for fun, some of you guys might say, "Hey, Mr. Chang, I appreciate you involving students and drawing them and stuff like that." And hey, I'm trying to entertain myself and work on some skills at home. It's a little bit of a hobby, but also I'll say, if I didn't get your hair right, you also please keep in mind that it has been almost like a month and something since the last time I've seen you, so there's a good chance your hair might even look like this too, right? Anyways, we're doing practice right here from the workbook, page 54 to 55, 2 to 5, and 7. Give it a shot. The answer should be there in the back of the book. send me any questions you have about the questions, and that's about that. Okay. Good luck with all this stuff, and keep up the great work, and stay safe, everyone.